Woppi the mole was in a terrible mood. He had forgotten to bring his glasses, and without them he truly couldn't see a thing. Normally, something like this wouldn't happen to him, but today he slept through his alarm and was now running very late. The forest animals wanted to meet to discuss new rules, because the older animals in particular were constantly getting upset about everything. This just won't do, or what has become of the children these days, they said incessantly. Woppi, on the other hand, wasn't the least bit interested in attending this meeting. But as the oldest animal in the forest, he had certain duties that he didn't enjoy. Back when Woppi himself was a young mole, he had to listen to those exact same sayings. How often people had complained about him when he left his molehills on the beautiful meadow, or accidentally dug through another animal's burrow. Fortunately, he was very quick back then and made a fast getaway. Today, he had a different secret weapon, and when he saw Bushy the squirrel, he knew he'd have to use it immediately. Bushy started in right away. Woppi, Woppi, someone stole my nuts, but I've already found them again. Do you know which rules are about to be discussed? What do you think about it? Do you think the animals will reach an agreement, or do you think there will be a giant argument again, because everyone is talking over each other? The words poured out of the squirrel. But Woppi looked around and said very quietly and slowly, I didn't understand a thing. Unfortunately, I don't have my hearing aid with me. Well, I must be going. It was nice to see you. And while the squirrel was still digesting these words, Woppi had already moved on. Woppi finally reached the large clearing under the old oak tree. He could only see vaguely that the place was already swarming with animals. The loud chattering, squeaking and roaring could be heard from afar. It sounded less like a meeting and more like a heavy thunderstorm. There are toys lying around everywhere, ranted the old lady badger, and the young foxes run through our gardens in the middle of the night, the rabbit complained. The young animals tried to push back, but we need space to play. You guys are just boring. Woppi slowly pushed himself to the very edge of the assembly, wanting nothing to do with any of this, when he suddenly heard his name being called repeatedly. Oh dear, he thought, held his hand to his ear and squinted into the voice. Hello? Is someone there? He called out in a shaky voice that sounded much older than he felt. Immediately, all the animals fell silent. People had respect for the oldest mole in the forest, or at least pity. The deer who was leading the meeting stepped toward him. Woppi, finally! We are currently arguing about the new forest rules. We need your opinion. Woppi stared intensely at the deer's belly because he couldn't find his face. What did you say? My hearing aid is still on the nightstand. You'll have to speak louder and more clearly, young man. The deer turned red, took a deep breath, and roared so slowly and clearly that it could be heard all the way to the edge of the forest. We need new laws! Woppi answered. New paws? What's wrong with my paws? They're a bit dirty from digging, but that's a mole's life. A murmur went through the crowd. The animals realized they weren't getting anywhere this way. If they wanted Woppi to understand them, they had to stop screaming and phrase their arguments differently. The old lady badger stepped forward, placed a paw on Woppi's shoulder and said very calmly, Woppi, we are annoyed because the young ones are so messy. Woppi nodded slowly. Ah, order. Yes, I remember. When I was young, the old moles always complained about my molehills. They said I was ruining the lawn. But do you know what? In those molehills, birds later searched for worms, and mice played hide and seek in them. He paused and looked around at the blurred circle of animals. Perhaps what you call disorder is simply living life to the others. It became deathly silent in the clearing. The old animals looked at each other and thought back to their own youth. Suddenly they realized As long as they only complained about one another, nobody was listening. And Woppi, who didn't actually need a hearing aid at all, hoped that the animals wouldn't always come to him whenever they had a problem. After all, what he liked most was his peace and quiet.